Hey guys, today I'll show you a crime thriller TV series named Tokyo Vice Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a detective and an American reporter named Jake preparing for an upcoming meeting. Clad in bulletproof vests and armed with handguns, they arrive as planned at the posh restaurant. At an elegant table overlooking the entire city of Tokyo, a silent confrontation of threats and power struggle begins. Several Mafia gangsters fix their gaze on Jake. The suited boss by the window threatens Jake to stop his investigation, or it's not just him who'll suffer, but his family too. Upon hearing this, Jake's expression hardens. He lights a cigarette and falls deep into thought. The scene flashes back to 2 years ago. Back then, Jake was new to the city. He spent all his time studying, whether in a rattling train car or a noisy restaurant. He would use any spare moment to hit the books. He was a mad scholar by day, moonlighting to earn his living in a shabby room above a restaurant by night. He seemed to have a peculiar interest in the Japanese Mafia. His tiny bedroom was plastered with information about the Mafia. The day of the qualifying exam for reporters arrived soon. Jake, as a master of studying, had prepared thoroughly. Even for the entire exam in Japanese, he was brimming with confidence. His pen seemed to move as if guided by a divine hand. When others were still buried in their papers, Jake had already finished and was waiting to hand in his exam. Suddenly, he realized that he had missed an entire page of questions. After struggling with disappointment and despair for several days, he faced the panel of stern interviewers. Despite the missed questions, he stood out among the candidates. The interviewers had reservations about his foreign status, but his unpretentious demeanor and quick-witted mind helped him pass the interview smoothly. His first day at the newspaper began. In the busy and crowded office, everything seemed to emit the scent of ink that delighted Jake. However, his excitement was dampened right after the morning meeting when his superior, Emmy, berated him for calling her by her first name instead of the more formal Japanese honorific of last name plus Miss. Jake shook his head innocently, indicating that he meant no disrespect. Emmy, with a professional fake smile, sternly told him not to do as he pleased here because it wouldn't fly in this newspaper, and certainly not with her. As a newcomer, Jake was assigned to the police news team. The team leader seemed to find fault with Jake at every turn, even mocking him as a sightseeing tourist. Jake, being targeted everywhere, felt a tinge of injustice. Fortunately, a dinner gathering that evening helped him integrate into the group of newcomers. The next day, a murder occurred on a pedestrian bridge in Tokyo. Jake, as a reporter, rushed to the scene to investigate. It was here that he met the same detective from the opening of the story, whose name is Hiroto. After the police collected evidence, they held a press conference. The entire meeting was dull, with the police reciting pre-prepared statements, providing the journalists with only the information that wouldn't cause a stir. Jake had no interest in the droning speaker on stage. Instead, his attention was drawn to the ruffian-like cop, Miyamoto. In response to Jake's curious gaze, a colleague described Miyamoto as a pimp fond of women. Back at the office, Jake started researching the Japanese Mafia whenever he had a chance. Emmy brought him a new assignment, to investigate the residence of the victim found on the bridge. Jake rushed to the victim's address. The decent residence had a mailbox stuffed full of letters. Among them, Jake noticed a final demand for payment. Following the address and logo on the envelope, he located a rundown office building. Back at the office, Jake wrote down his findings, but the team leader was dissatisfied with his report. Jake had classified the bridge death as a murder, which contradicted the police's information. The team leader's rage affected Jake's immediate superior, Emmy, who apologized, then turned her frustration onto Jake, who was trying to comfort her. After work, Jake vented to other reporters about his unfortunate scolding for not replicating the police report verbatim. He couldn't understand why he couldn't have his own thoughts and was reduced to a mere transcriber for the police. After a lot of contemplation, he decided to seek assistance from Miyamoto, the police officer he met at the press conference during the day. Jake and Miyamoto found themselves in a bar Miyamoto was well acquainted with. As a local bigwig, Miyamoto was engaged in lively conversation with others, while Jake encountered a minor gang follower, Sato, in the restroom. Jake noticed a unique tattoo on Sato's arm and attempted to strike up a conversation, but he was blatantly ignored. Back in the lounge, Jake's attention was drawn to a foreign female singer on stage who seemed to pique Sato's interest as well. After her performance, Jake invited the lady for a drink. However, when Jake tried to prolong the conversation, the lady switched her demeanor, saying that there's an additional price for that. The more drinks he bought, the longer she would chat with him. Jake, rich in hormones but poor in cashes, could only laugh awkwardly and watch as she left with her sexy body. Finally, Miyamoto, having some free time, sat down with Jake, but his attention was more on the sexy dancer on stage than on Jake. Regardless of how enticing the dancer was, Jake, eager to learn, only had eyes for Miyamoto. He persistently sought advice from Miyamoto, who only repeated that there were no murders in Japan. Before Jake could delve into a deeper discussion with him, the beep of a pager interrupted them. Miyamoto received a police message and rushed to the scene. An old man stood there, seemingly in shock and on the brink of doing something drastic. Despite the police's pleas, the old man didn't respond. After a moment of hesitation, he struck a match in his hand. Jake watched helplessly as the old man gave up struggling and turned into a charred corpse. Despite being shocked, he still managed to find a clue on the ground, a business card from a loan company. The logo on this card matched the final demand notice found at the bridge victim's house. Excited about his discovery, Jake relayed the information to Emmy. He brought 2 bottles of wine to the police station, subtly bribing the police to help him find the self-immolation victim's home address. In pursuit of the truth, he visited the widow of the deceased and played her a harassment call from the Mafia about a debt. It seemed the deceased had taken out a high-interest loan and took his life due to the pressure from the Mafia. But after his death, the calls from the Mafia stopped. Jake couldn't understand why the previously relentless Mafia had suddenly backed off. He visited the scene of the self-immolation. The horrifying scene had vanished, and only a few chrysanthemums by the roadside mourned the loss of the old man crushed by reality. Jake could almost see the old man pouring gasoline on himself in despair. On the other side of town, a solemn gathering of the local Mafia was taking place to crown their new leadership today, with Ishida, the boss of the Chihara group, seated at the head of the table. Sato, a young follower, watched the coronation ceremony with reverence and admiration. The senior members emptied the glasses of wine in front of them, signaling the completion of the ceremony. The room erupted in uniform applause. Jake was now experiencing the hard life of a working man. He was investigating a case of underwear theft, running around the streets only to be mistaken for a pervert harassing women. Frustrated, he complained to his colleagues about the pointlessness of pursuing such trivial cases, his mind still haunted by the bridge murder and the Kabukicho self-immolation case. However, he had no choice but to obey his superiors, even though he had found no clues. Prompted by Emmy, he remembered a friend he had made at the police station, Miyamoto. Miyamoto suggested that perhaps there was no underwear thief in Tokyo at all, just a few ladies who had lost their underwear on a windy day. People just loved a good pervert story. Jake took Miyamoto's words to heart and returned to his newspaper office, inspired to write. No matter how many drafts he wrote, Emmy rejected them all. But Emmy couldn't bear to watch him struggle anymore. She graciously helped him revise his work and agreed to publish Jake's debut piece in the morning paper. Jake felt a surge of confidence. He left the newspaper office, determined to reinvestigate the 2 previous cases. At the same time, the detective Hiroto was observing the interrogation of a suspect in the bridge murder case in an interview room. However, this suspect had gotten the crime scene and time wrong. He was clearly a scapegoat, pushed forward by the Tozawa group. The colleague, with solid evidence and testimony, didn't want to delve deeper and just wanted to close the case quickly. But Hiroto disagreed with this superficial approach to solving cases. Later, Hiroto visited the widow of the bridge murder victim. He reported to the widow the outcome of the case and confirmed with her that their family had once faced financial difficulties and had borrowed from a high-interest loan company. The widow revealed to Hiroto that they had collected evidence to sue the loan company, but her husband was silenced just a few hours later. Seeing the evidence handed over by the widow, Hiroto fell into deep thought. At this moment, Jake arrived at the widow's house. The widow, who had been forbidden to disclose information to the media, sternly refused him, but Jake refused to leave. Hiroto noticed the commotion at the door but chose not to interfere. After his unsuccessful visit, Jake left dejectedly. As usual, Jake arrived at the newspaper office early the next morning. He had just settled down to chat with a few colleagues when his boss stormed in, cursing and looking for him. Apparently, there was a significant issue with the underwear thief report he had submitted the day before. The conclusion he had drawn, that there was no underwear thief, turned out to be wrong. The police had just issued a notice stating that the underwear thief had been caught. Jake was mortified, and his boss removed Jake from the reporting team and demoted him to the clipping team. Jake packed his things without complaint and moved to the clipping team. His old colleague comforted him not to take it to heart. Emmy also offered to give Jake another chance to write a report, but if he couldn't produce a valuable report this time, he would probably have to pack up and leave. That evening, Jake returned to his apartment with his spirits low. He had unexpectedly received a package from his mother who lived across the ocean. The box was filled with bits and pieces from Jake's previous life, and these objects filled with memories made him feel a sense of warmth. It seemed as if his experiences at the newspaper office during the day weren't that terrible. He went out again to look for writing material and called his mother. On the phone, his mother suggested that he should visit home more often, and that if things didn't work out in Japan, he could always return to the US and take it easy. But Jake was determined to make it on his own. He hung up the phone before his mother could finish speaking because Miyamoto had just walked out of the police station. Jake didn't sever ties with Miyamoto because of the false report. He even treated him to a lavish dinner again. Miyamoto seemed to see his sincerity and mysteriously imparted his wisdom to him, saying that information was for trading. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Jake took his words to heart. He offered to treat Miyamoto to dinner in exchange for asking if he knew any inside information about the loan company he had encountered earlier. However, Miyamoto, while bragging about the free beef, claimed to know nothing. This time, Jake got smart. He ordered a plethora of dishes and then excused himself to go to the restroom, taking the opportunity to bail. Miyamoto only realized that Jake had tricked him when he received the hefty bill from the restaurant. The scene shifts to a small meeting of the Chihara group, a notorious Mafia clan. Their territory has been anything but peaceful recently. The rival Tozawa group has been causing trouble, pillaging and vandalizing the shops protected by Chihara. Such provocations are impossible to ignore, but Ishida, the head of the Chihara group, remains remarkably composed. To avoid drawing police attention, he decides not to retaliate. Instead, he increases the protection fee for the shops in his territory, using the extra income to grease the right palms. The hapless Sato is chosen to execute this unpleasant task. Sato arrives at the bar previously visited by Miyamoto, just in time to witness a drama unfolding. The bar's leading hostess, Samantha, goes to the cloakroom to fetch something and stumbles upon the boss harassing the newly hired girl. She despises the boss, but the boss threatens her with her work visa, telling her to be more respectful. Samantha stands her ground and keeps arguing. As the argument escalates, Sato interrupts, signaling the boss to hurry up and pay the protection money. After collecting a round of protection fees, Sato returns to the gang's headquarters, but his superior realizes that the bar owner's payment falls short. In his anger, he slaps Sato across the face. The next day, Samantha wants to move into a new apartment in the costly city of Tokyo, but the real estate agent, seeing her as a somewhat destitute foreigner, doesn't even bother to give her a second glance. He has no idea that the woman before him earns a hefty sum every night and has already saved a stack of banknotes stored in the cabinet. Leaving the agency empty-handed, Samantha receives a call from her colleague, Pina, who asks Samantha to accompany her shopping for a gift for a regular client. Samantha agrees to go shopping, but can't understand why Pina would want to spend money. Knowing that Samantha only cares about making and saving money, Pina doesn't dawdle. She quickly selects a gift and rushes to pay. As dusk descends, Samantha returns to the bar to begin her work. She moves gracefully amongst the patrons, her makeup immaculate. Although the new girl is beautiful, she hasn't yet mastered the art of working the nightlife. She's sitting at the bar, visibly upset. Samantha comforts her, telling her to just smile and cater to the customers and be an emotionless money-making machine. Soon enough, the newbie gets called to entertain a customer. Meanwhile, Samantha is also requested by a patron. It's none other than Jake, a reporter hungry for a scoop. Jake frequents this chaotic bar, hoping to dig up some juicy news. Coincidentally, he runs into Sato, a member of the notorious Chihara group. Sato is a regular of Samantha. As soon as she sees him, she saunters over. As they converse, a tipsy Jake suddenly joins in. He gives Sato a nickname and even teases his shoes for being knockoffs, but Sato takes it in stride and also invites Jake to join their drinking session. Seizing the opportunity, Jake tries to get close to Sato, but before Jake can dig up more information about the gang from Sato, he has to rush off to catch the last train home. After leaving his business card, he scrambles to catch his train but misses it. He has to return to his office and spend the night. A considerate colleague turns on a radio to help him fall asleep, and it's this radio that gives Jake his big break. Late into the night, an urgent police announcement on the radio startles Jake awake. Gathering his gear, he races on his bike to Kabukicho, the crime scene mentioned in the report. He infiltrates the dimly lit dance hall and discovers two Mafia factions gathered there. On one side is the troublesome Tozawa group, always looking for trouble. On the other is the local powerhouse, the Chihara group. Sandwiched in the middle is the terrified dance hall owner who's supposed to be under the protection of Chihara. Tozawa Group, in a provocative move, wants to teach the dance hall owner a lesson. Just as the owner's face pales with fear, Detective Hiroto walks in, calm and composed. He seems to be familiar with the boss of Tozawa Group. After a whispered conversation, they temporarily resolve their conflict. The hiding Jake is eager to document this big news, but as soon as he turns on his camera, it makes a loud noise. Caught red-handed, he's surrounded by people he would rather not provoke. Luckily, Hiroto steps forward. After inspecting Jake's camera, he warns him not to report anything that happened tonight. Jake, teetering on the brink of unemployment, is at a loss for what to do. He hides by the dance hall entrance, watching as the mysterious Hiroto drives off. In a bid to learn more about the Mafia, Jake, armed with ice cream and beer, visits the home of Hiroto. Initially reluctant to entertain him, Hiroto changes his mind when he sees the gifts Jake has brought. Jake beams when asked to stay. He's keen to get information from Hiroto, but his eagerness leads him to overstep. Jake hastily asks Hiroto if he could reveal some news about the gang, seeing that he had refrained from exposing the incident at Kabukicho. This question makes Hiroto balk, accusing Jake of threatening him and promptly dismissing him. Realizing his mistake, Jake apologizes, sharing his awkward predicament. He just wants to be a true reporter, exposing the darkness lurking beneath Tokyo's peaceful facade. Moved by Jake's sincerity, Hiroto sits next to him and explains what happened that night in Kabukicho. The apparent peace in Tokyo over the past few years is maintained under a delicate balance. The gangs agree not to infringe upon each other, and the police turn a blind eye. Now, with the leader of the Tozawa Group returning to Tokyo, the long-standing balance is at risk of being broken. The incident Jake witnessed was the Tozawa Group attempting to seize territory from the Chihara Group. Jake nods in understanding, intrigued by the intricate dynamics within the Mafia. The next day, Sato and his superior Kume visit Kabukicho, which has been harassed by the Tozawa Group. The bar boss complains that despite paying protection money, he didn't receive protection from the Chihara Group and was intimidated by the Tozawa Group. If Chihara continues to take money without providing protection, he might as well switch allegiance to Tozawa Group. Hearing this, Sato slaps the boss for his inflammatory remark. While Kume appreciates Sato's action in defending the Chihara Group, he seems to notice Sato's recent lack of dedication towards the gang. Meanwhile, Jake diligently works in the cut-and-paste department when he receives a call that changes his dreary situation. It's Hiroto, inviting him to infiltrate a gang's lair. Jake readily agrees, puts down his craft work, and joins the fully equipped riot police and Hiroto at the Tozawa Group's office. Hiroto's stern expression reminds Jake that the mission is not simple and he mustn't be careless. As expected, when Hiroto opens the door, the room is full of intimidating gangsters in suits. But Hiroto is unfazed. He insists on taking 3 men into custody to account for the previous night's confrontation at Kabukicho. The gang's young leader, unable to out-argue Hiroto, signals his men to confess. For the first time, Jake gets a first-hand experience of a police gang arrest and can't contain his excitement. He grabs his notebook and jots down this explosive news. Since the story is incredibly sensational, Jake's article is published quickly. Jake finally has a piece to his credit, and his colleagues gather to celebrate. Besides the newspaper, the news of the Tozawa Group being handled by the police is also broadcast on TV. Watching the 3 suspects being escorted out, the Chihara members are satisfied. However, Sato notices a familiar face on the screen. It's Jake. The scene shifts to a bar where Samantha meets a new customer, Matsuo, who has come specifically for her. They strike up a lively conversation about Japanese poetry. After the bar closes, the hostesses gather together, waiting for the boss to distribute their earnings from the night. The bar's long-standing top hostess comes in first, followed by Samantha, who always knows exactly what to say to maximize her tips. The boss praises both of them, especially for their ability to chat with customers about everything from poetry to philosophy, while also expertly working their charm. Some of the less successful hostesses, who don't understand the art of selling dreams, are chastised. Samantha steps in to defend her colleagues, stopping the boss's tirade. Back in the dressing room, she comforts a newcomer, telling her not to lose hope. Samantha shares her secret plan with her. She's saving up to open her own bar. Samantha had previously been seen looking for a place to rent, but it turns out she was planning to go solo. Now that she's saved enough money, she's just waiting for the right opportunity to bring some of the younger hostesses with her and start her own place. But she makes it clear to the girl that this plan must remain a secret. When they return to the main area, the other hostesses are eagerly picking out beautiful dresses brought by the Chihara Group. The henchman, however, almost starts an argument with the hostesses. Sato steps in, telling his man to leave the hostesses alone. He apologizes to the girls and then walks over to Samantha, inviting her to see a dress he's picked out for her. Curious, Samantha follows Sato into the dressing room, where a bright yellow dress hangs. Sato encourages Samantha to try it on, turning his back respectfully as she changes. Samantha is pleased with her reflection and asks the price, intending to buy the dress. However, Sato tells her the dress is not for sale, it's a gift for her. As she leaves the bar, another admirer, Jake, is waiting for her under the streetlights. His dazzling smile is impossible to resist. Samantha drops her professional demeanor and engages in sincere conversation with Jake. They find they have a lot in common, and when the topic turns to why they both left their hometowns to come to Tokyo, Samantha unexpectedly reveals her genuine emotions. The next day was smooth sailing for Jake, both in love and at work. He visited a mall and splurged on an expensive melon as a thank you gift for Hiroto, who had guided him through a visit to a Mafia hideout. Jake arrived at Hiroto's home. After enjoying the melon, Jake and Hiroto turned their talk to business. Jake handed over a matchbox bearing the logo of a loan shark company, hoping to get some leads from Hiroto. True to his reputation, Hiroto recognized the logo and produced a large book containing the investigative records on the loan shark company. However, he couldn't give the evidence to Jake due to police regulations. But while rules are fixed, people aren't. As Jake was leaving Hiroto's house, Hiroto's young daughter ran out with the investigation documents. If a child were to sneak out the evidence and hand them to a reporter, Hiroto wouldn't technically be breaking any rules. Jake then smiled knowingly, appreciating Hiroto's clever workaround. He even started his own research on the bus. Meanwhile, the Chihara group was having a tea meeting with the police, agreeing to continue their cooperation to maintain peace in Tokyo. However, Ishida was interested in the 2 cups of tea in front of the police, which remained untouched despite the group's subtle hints. Downstairs, Sato was quietly reading a newspaper by the window. The article about the capture of the 3 Tozawa group members written by Jake caught his attention. Coincidentally, there was a troublemaker in the group who had once accompanied Sato to deliver dresses to Samantha's bar. He noticed Sato's special feelings for Samantha and couldn't resist teasing him in front of the others. But his words went too far and escalated into an insult. Angered by the defamation of the girl he liked, Sato's rage flared up. He glanced at his superior, Kume, whose expression seemed to give Sato permission to retaliate. With Kume's cue, Sato walked up to the troublemaker, inviting him to a rooftop showdown. The atmosphere livened up, and the members followed them to the rooftop to watch. However, the fight didn't offer much in terms of entertainment, because the troublemaker was all talk. Sato's punches rained down on him until he lost consciousness. Kume then stopped Sato from venting further, but it was too late. They were seen by the big boss, Ishida, who caught Sato beating up a member. Sato fell to his knees, begging for forgiveness. To make up for his mistake, he offered to find Jake to solve the problem that had been bothering Ishida, the police's refusal to drink their tea. As night fell, Samantha finished her shift and returned home to unwind, oblivious to the pair of eyes watching her every move from the shadows. The man was none other than Matsuo, the one who had discussed poetry with her at the bar. Elsewhere, Jake was eager to meet his co-worker at a traditional Japanese bar. However, before he reached the bar, he spotted his co-worker entangled with a strange man in a back alley. During dinner, he asked his co-worker about the incident, but he denied having any contact with anyone. Recognizing his reluctance to share more, Jake pulled out the evidence given by Hiroto, indicating that he was one step closer to the truth. After dinner, they went to a baseball field to meet another colleague. While playing baseball, they discussed the new evidence Jake had obtained. Yet before they could reach a conclusion, a gang of suited thugs suddenly appeared, choking the colleague into near unconsciousness. They then whisked Jake away, who sat trembling in the car, clueless about his future. The car stopped in front of a large mansion. The suited thugs were surprisingly courteous as they led him inside the base of the Chihara group. The boss, Ishida, had called Jake to collaborate due to Sato's recommendation. Hoping to leverage Jake's relations with the police, Ishida wanted Jake's help. The underling who Sato had beaten into a pulp previously served tea, his exaggerated bruised makeup causing Jake to stare in shock. Ishida expressed his recent concerns. The Chihara had always had a good relationship with the police, but recently, rumors have circulated that the Chihara were bribing the police. To avoid suspicion, the police had stopped accepting Chihara's tea, leading the gang members to believe that Ishida was colluding with the police and had become an informant. Ishida was worried that these rumors might get him killed. He hoped Jake could use his connections with the police to find the source of these rumors. In return, the Chihara would provide Jake with information. Jake was surprised to discover he had this kind of influence, but he agreed for the time being. As he left, he complained to Sato about getting him involved in this mess, but Sato didn't seem concerned, believing this collaboration would benefit both parties. The next morning, Jake went to the police station to help Ishida and ran into Miyamoto, whom he had previously tricked. Before he could finish speaking, he noticed Hiroto passing by the staircase. Jake explained Ishida's request to Hiroto, who accepted the task without a second thought because he knew that if Tozawa was removed, Ishida would take over and stir up trouble in Tokyo. With Hiroto's promise, Jake left the police station and went to work at the newspaper office. The colleague who had witnessed Jake being kidnapped by the gang the previous night stopped him to ask what had happened. They were about to search for his body by the river, but Jake just smiled without giving a direct answer. He took the evidence from Hiroto to Emi and emphasized the connection between the self-immolation case in Kabukicho and the murder on the overpass. He pointed out that the victims in both cases had been encouraged to commit suicide. This reminded Emi of another recent case. Her excellent memory amazed Jake. Emi quickly delegated the task of finding the headquarters and the identity of the president to a pair of colleagues. She then left with Jake to visit the victim's home. The victim of this case was a Korean woman. Because of the language barrier, her husband had difficulty understanding Jake's broken Japanese. To everyone's surprise, Emi began speaking Korean. Jake was taken aback. They then started conversing in Korean, leaving Jake feeling out of the loop. The man poured out everything he knew about the situation and even presented a bill from a loan shark company for Emi to review. Jake and Emi noticed the address on the bill and followed the lead to the loan company. Emi pretended to be a desperate person in need of money, and surprisingly, she managed to fool the company's staff and get a copy of the loan contract. Back at the newspaper office, she examined the contract and found that most terms were related to life insurance. One clause was particularly blunt. If the borrower dies, the deceased's relatives will forfeit all insurance compensation, which will be paid to the loan company. This means that if the loan company constantly harasses the borrower to the point of desperation, the company could profit from their death. Such inhuman actions greatly angered both Emi and Jake. Meanwhile, the two colleagues who were assigned to find the headquarters and the identity of the president returned to the company. Despite the effort, they managed to find some clues. Jake and Emi followed these new leads to the home of the loan company's president. However, the home was located in a shabby apartment building, and the president barely spoke at all. It was evident that this was a shell company exploiting someone else's identity. Emi and Jake looked at each other, realizing their investigation had hit a dead end. In order to gather more clues, Emi had to tolerate having dinner with a group of sleazy police officers. She pointed out that the manner of the Korean woman's death did not match what was mentioned in the confession letter. However, these officers were indifferent. They had no interest in reopening a closed case and kept harassing Emi, who had to endure it all for the sake of her work. On the other hand, Hiroto was fulfilling his promise to investigate the rumors. He had deduced that there might be a traitor within the Chihara group who was spreading rumors in collaboration with the Tozawa group. He attempted to interrogate a member of the Tozawa group they had arrested a few days earlier, but the underling remained silent. Seeing this, Hiroto unlocked the man's handcuffs and told him to leave, not to occupy their prison cells. This unexpected act of kindness scared the underling, as he knew if he was released so soon, his gang would suspect that he had struck a deal with the police. This unconventional threat might just be the way to get him to talk. The scene shifts to Samantha preparing to strike out on her own. She has finally found the perfect location for her dream bar. She can even picture herself, dressed up in glamorous attire, walking through the gilded bar. However, as she secretly tries to recruit her colleagues to join her new venture, word reaches the current bar owner. Quickly, Samantha realizes that the new girl must have spilled her secret. Although the bar owner isn't particularly influential, he can seek help from the Chihara group. Upon hearing the news, Kume informs Sato and instructs him to handle Samantha by any means necessary. Samantha, however, is oblivious to the severity of the situation. She is dining with a client as usual. The client this time is Matsuo, a new patron at her bar who has been spying on her. After a satisfying meal, Matsuo reveals his sinister intentions. He asks Samantha how long she thinks she can hide the money she stole from others. It's clear that he knows about her past. He even mentions the location where she hides the money at home. Samantha's smile fades instantly. She doesn't understand how Matsuo found out about her theft. In a panic, she grabs her purse and leaves the private dining room. She arrives at the bar where she works and lights a cigarette in the dressing room, worry written on her face. The bar owner enters the room with Sato, intending to teach Samantha a bloody lesson with the help of the gangsters. But Sato doesn't plan on using violence. He advises Samantha, claiming that he only wants to help her. But she doesn't appreciate his help, and even mocks Sato for his lack of influence. She turns away and leaves, acting as if she's not the one in trouble. Annoyed, Sato kicks a chair and storms out. Outside, he runs into Jake, who was waiting in the lobby for Samantha. Sato informs Jake that Samantha won't be available tonight and invites him to go clubbing. Jake happily agrees. His dance talent is unleashed on the dance floor, attracting a woman who dances closely with him. After leaving the club, Sato, Jake, and the two women head to a love hotel. Jake is excited by the variety of rooms. After a smelly hormone yoga, they leave the room and Sato emerges from a nearby room. He hands over payment, and it dawns on Jake that he has just spent the night with a paid lady. Exhausted by the hormone yoga, Sato takes Jake to a fancy restaurant for a meal to replenish their energy. Jake enjoys the food thoroughly. Indeed, there are perks to hanging out with a gangster. At this moment, Tozawa walks in with a beautiful woman and his henchmen. Sato warns Jake not to stare, but Jake strikes up a conversation with Tozawa and even hands him his business card. Sato is mortified and would love to bury his face in his food. Despite this, Tozawa recognizes him. Tozawa asks Sato to send his regards to his boss Ishida, then walks into a private dining room with the girl. The scene shifts to Pina, the bar hostess, who has transformed into a major patron at the gigolo shop. She endures distasteful moments accompanying old men at the bar to earn money, and instead needs the refreshing sight of handsome young men. Here, she is a generous spender, willingly aiding a gigolo in boosting his performance, thinking he is her true love. She's tired of her life as a bar hostess and wants to revive her modeling dreams, hoping the man would leave Tokyo with her. However, the gigolo doesn't want to leave his flourishing business at the shop. While the two are in a cozy discussion, Samantha storms in, wanting to settle scores with the new girl who leaked her secret. The girl, in a pitiable state, admits that she had passed on the news about Samantha's plan to open her own bar to other girls, but she only meant to make other girls kinder to Samantha. Samantha has to scold her before leaving in a huff. Pina follows her, urging her to calm down and asking if something else has happened. However, Samantha refuses to say anything. She returns home to pack her things. An old ring reveals her buried past. She used to be shy and conservative, the epitome of a good girl. Her long-sleeved woolen sweater, over-the-knee long skirt, and a church badge pinned on her chest all hinted at her nun identity. She was devout, praying before meals and handing out missionary leaflets after school. Her innate coquettishness seemed trapped within a shell of doctrine. This contradiction inevitably led to irreparable consequences. Now, as a top bar hostess, she is in trouble. The shadow of her past in the church is sweeping back towards her. Helpless, she seeks her friend Pina and reveals the reason why she is being targeted. She stole $4 million in cash from the church. Although she can now repay this amount with interest, if the church insists on punishing her, she would be deported for theft. Meanwhile, Jake awakens in a narrow room. His mother calls again to urge him to come home, but Jack doesn't want to give up Tokyo. His conflicts with his father make him resistant to the idea of home. He vents his frustrations at a martial arts gym mentioned by Miyamoto, but gets taught a harsh lesson there. The mysterious martial arts seem a bit too much for him, but fighting seems to build camaraderie. After the fight, they sit at the foot of a wall and have a heart-to-heart. Miyamoto gravely warns Jake not to trust Hiroto too much, as he only thinks about himself. Miyamoto's insinuations slightly influence Jake, who then receives news of a Chihara traitor from Hiroto, but begins to doubt his motivations. Hiroto senses that someone has been feeding Jake some harmful ideas, but he doesn't probe further. He instructs Jake to deliver the message to Ishida, but not to accept any favors from him, as that would be equivalent to opening Pandora's box. Jake, with the lead, finds Ishida. As expected, Ishida offers him some advantages, money and women at his choice. Jake, heeding Hiroto's advice, outright refuses all, but Ishida doesn't give up. He suggests that he could provide some information for Jake. This sways Jake slightly. He pulls out the old matchbox again, asking Ishida if he knows anything about this loan shark company. Ishida takes a glance at the matchbox, acknowledging that he does know some inside information, but denies that it's a Chihara business, as they would never dabble in such unscrupulous dealings. He advises Jake not to focus on those who lend money, but to investigate those who are unwilling to lend. Jake rushed back to his office. He discovers discovered that all the victims who had been driven to desperation by the loan sharks had previously approached the same legal bank. He hastened to the bank. The owner of the bank seemed familiar. He was the same flunky of Tozawa that Jake had seen in the upscale restaurant. This made him wonder if the loan shark company was an enterprise of the Tozawa gang. Jake pulled out his recording pen and began casual conversation with the banker. He pulled out photos of victims who had been driven to death by the loan shark company, asking the banker if he knew anything. The banker instantly grew serious. Under Jake's interrogation, he switched off the recording pen and agreed to provide evidence about the loan shark company and the Tozawa gang. Excited, Jake reported his progress to Emmy, who immediately sent someone to provide support. However, the experienced Emmy had a feeling that the banker might renege on his promise. As she predicted, no sooner had the banker agreed to provide evidence to Jake than he informed Tozawa. The banker was anxious, but the cold-blooded Tozawa remained calm. He instructed the banker to do what he should. The banker understood immediately upon hearing this. Emmy's colleague arrived soon after. The two entered to find the banker had already breathed his last. There was a suicide note next to him. Jake carefully unfolded the note with a towel, only to discover that the banker had taken full responsibility, leaving Tozawa out of the picture. The police and ambulance arrived shortly after. Jake stayed at the scene, not willing to give up. The chance to uncover the truth slipped right through his fingers. The news that was about to make the headlines had evaporated. He cursed in anger, but his anger turned to sorrow at the sight of the banker's lonely wife and daughter. He felt as if he had destroyed this family. He returned to the office, trying to convince his boss to give him more time to unearth the truth. However, his boss believed that he should release the current news immediately. By the time he found evidence of the gang, it would be too late. Jake had no other choice. He poured out his grievances and pain to Hiroto, who comforted him like a father. This made Jake think of his own father, who only ever told him to come home, never appreciating him. Hiroto was concerned about how Jake had found a lead in the case. Jake remembered Hiroto's advice and hid the help he received from Ishida, claiming that he had a sudden epiphany. Hiroto was suspicious of Jake's explanation, but he chose not to confront him. In addition to Jake, Sato was also having a rough day. He wasn't able to smooth things over with Samantha, and his lie to the boss was discovered by Kume. According to the gang's rules, he should lose a finger as an apology. Aware of his guilt, Sato submitted obediently. At that moment, boss Ishida came to the rooftop to watch. He pulled out a gun and ended up pointing it at Kume. It turned out Kume was a spy working for the Tozawa gang. When his identity was revealed, Kume didn't deny it. Although Ishida was furious at his betrayal, he couldn't bring himself to harm his longtime subordinate. He handed the gun to Sato, forcing him to do the deed. Bewildered, Sato took the gun and aimed at the man who wanted to chop off his hand seconds ago. But how could he pull the trigger on the man who had saved his life? Kume saw Sato's anguish and hesitation, knowing this would haunt Sato for the rest of his life. With tears in his eyes, Kume rushed towards the railing, jumping off and ending his own life. Kume's fall attracted the attention of his gangsters. His voluntary death was the final kindness he left for Sato. After Kume's death, Ishida called Hiroto to help with the disposal of the body. According to the gang's rules, Kume should be dismembered, but Hiroto advised against it, warning that this would escalate things with the Tozawa gang, which wouldn't be good for the Chihara gang. Ishida felt Hiroto's advice made sense. Hiroto then went to the Tozawa gang's building to inform Tozawa's flunky that the spy Kume was dead, and Ishida had no intention of retaliation or starting a war. However, Tozawa expressed a sense of regret and disdain. That night, Jake went to the bar where Samantha worked, trying to soothe his pain from causing the banker's death. Sato, who had lost his boss today, was also genuinely upset. However, Samantha was still holding a grudge. She deliberately ignored Sato, taking Jake away right in front of him. Even though she sat with Jake at a table, her mind was constantly on Matsuo, the man who could deport her at any time. Her absent-mindedness angered Jake, who was in a bad mood. He lost his temper with Samantha, complaining about spending half a month's wages without receiving her companionship. Samantha fired back, berating Jake for being a disrespectful cheapskate, and stormed off to the bar to cool down. Sato saw an opportunity and pulled Samantha into the dressing room. He didn't just sweet-talk her like last time. Instead, he tried to make her realize the seriousness of the situation by yelling louder like a goose and pounding his stick harder. He scolded her for breaking the rules and not caring about the consequences. Samantha, however, retorted she had plenty of money to pay the price and threw a wad of cash at Sato. In his anger, Sato impulsively tongue-massaged her, and to his surprise, Samantha responded gently. They ended up in bed, releasing their long-suppressed emotions. Samantha opened up about her past and confessed that she felt a sense of belonging with Sato. Sato. Sato was touched by her words. He let his guard down and shared his pain of losing his boss that day. He admitted his fear that he might meet the same fate someday. Samantha comforted him using her skinny muscles, saying if he wanted to change his life, just do it. After saying goodbye to Sato, Samantha had to face the mess that was her own life. She went to Matsuo's place and pulled out a bag of money, trying to bribe him to leave. However, Matsuo was not interested in the money. His eyes, full of desire, were set on Samantha's sexy body. Faced with the perverted Matsuo, she didn't want to stay another second. She turned to leave, but was stopped by Matsuo, who threatened to have her deported out of Japan. The scene shifted to Sato, who had returned to the gang with encouragement from Samantha. However, the usually bustling entrance was quiet and eerie that night. He sensed something was wrong, rushed into the hall, and found his gangmates all injured and on the ground. Picking up a short knife, he ran upstairs to find Boss Ishida fighting alone against two men in black. He immediately joined the fight. After struggling for a few rounds, he found an opportunity and stabbed one of the men in the hairy chest. Having taken down one foe, he rushed to Ishida's side to help. But exhausted, he was pinned down by the other enemy. Just as he was about to be killed, Boss Ishida drew his samurai sword. The bloody night ended with their gang narrowly victorious. Sato, who in the morning had been trembling and unable to fire a gun, had become a blood-soaked warrior overnight. Jake rang the doorbell, bringing a gift as an apology for his previous outburst. Samantha, although still a little upset, accepted his apology. However, Jake was taking too much liberty. He began to meddle in her relationship with Sato. He warned her not to get involved with Sato, who was always close to death as a gangster. But Samantha was not grateful for his advice, and she lashed out at the meddling Jake. After being scolded, Jake went back to work at his company. He was still pursuing the Tozawa gang. Even colorful magazines and tabloids had become his clues. He found several large single photos of Tozawa, all taken by a photographer. He guessed that the photographer had a close relationship with the Tozawa gang. With the help of a colleague, he successfully found the photographer's address and disguised himself as a gangster fan, even asking the photographer for an autograph with his innocent smile. The photographer was flattered by this and warmly invited Jake in to talk. Seeing the photos of Tozawa all over the wall, Jake knew he had found the right person. He tried to get the photographer to reveal a connection between the Tozawa gang and loan sharking, but the photographer, who was rambling, didn't provide any useful information. To avoid suspicion, Jake asked about the beautiful girls in the photos and their relationship with Tozawa. The man said they were all Tozawa's girlfriends who never interacted with outsiders. One of them was even killed for talking once with a reporter. Jake nodded seriously and set his sights on Tozawa's current girlfriend. He trailed the girl all the way to a luxurious hotel, finally finding an opportunity to strike up a conversation when Tozawa left. He introduced himself as a reporter from Akira News, trying to instill fear in the girl about Tozawa to get the news he wanted. However, the girl didn't fall for it. She was elegant and composed, politely rejecting Jake. Meanwhile, Tozawa was carrying a briefcase, attending a high-end gangster meeting. The gang leaders of Tokyo had gathered to clarify the relationship between the Tozawa gang and the original Tokyo gangs. Each gang lord took turns expressing their dissatisfaction with the Tozawa gang's encroachment on Tokyo's territory. If it weren't for Ishida swallowing his grievances against Tozawa, the police and media would have long since trodden down the doorsteps of the gangs. The elder Tozawa understood the implications of everyone's words, but he had no intention of leaving Tokyo. Surely some compensation would suffice. So he gestured for Tozawa to open the briefcase. Ishida was the first to stand up. He took out several stacks from the briefcase and returned the rest. Tozawa didn't understand the meaning of Ishida's actions, but another gang lord said that some things can't be resolved with money. The elder Tozawa understood his meaning. Since money couldn't solve all problems, it seemed Tozawa would have to personally apologize. So he ordered his son to kneel down and apologize to the uncles. Tozawa wore an expression of disbelief. His entire face was a silent outpouring of indignation. His fists clenched, he bowed his head to his uncles. But the Tokyo gang lords didn't give him too hard a time and readily accepted his reluctant apology. After the gang lords left, Tozawa complained to his father about losing face. But the elder Tozawa was not pleased, retorting that his failed assassination attempt was embarrassing enough. Elsewhere, Sato, who had successfully defended the big boss, swiftly rose to the rank of a gang leader. However, the scene of the bloodbath at the Chihara meeting that night still lingered in his mind. He reported new clues to Ishida that the Tozawa gang was about to smuggle a batch of drugs through the airport. Upon hearing the news, Ishida and the gang discussed how to utilize this new information. A senior member believed that the Chihara should not use this opportunity to strike at the Tozawa gang, as it would start a war with Tozawa. Out of respect for him, Sato agreed with his views, but after he left, Sato shared his real opinion with Ishida. He argued that the key was not whether to use the new information, but how to use it without anyone noticing. Because of Sato's proven loyalty, Ishida had a special regard for this young man. He gave a pleased smile, seemingly in full agreement with Sato's viewpoint. Later that evening, Sato waited outside Jake's house. His plan to utilize the information involved using Jake. The unsuspecting Jake got into the car with Sato, where the boss Ishida was waiting. He told Jake that the Tozawa gang would transport a batch of drugs to the airport the next day. He offered this information to Jake for free, hoping for a future mutually beneficial cooperation. Jake planned to take full advantage of this opportunity. He rushed to Hiroto's house overnight, hoping Hiroto would join him in catching Tozawa red-handed. However, Hiroto was not thrilled by this news. He believed the timing was not right, and impulsive actions could bring unbearable consequences. But Jake didn't buy into Hiroto's caution. While he outwardly agreed with Hiroto, he secretly contacted Emi for advice. He briefly related the information he got, and Emi believed he should seize the opportunity and get a search warrant from other police officers. In the meantime, Tozawa, oblivious to the actions of the Chihara gang and Jake, was on a date with his girlfriend to alleviate the humiliation he had just suffered. His girlfriend comforted him, expressing her belief that Tozawa would surely bounce back. However, Tozawa probed his girlfriend about whether she had considered what would happen if they left Tokyo. Regardless of her responses, Tozawa was not satisfied. The upset girlfriend managed a strained smile and ate the steak Tozawa had put on her plate. On the other hand, Samantha finally returned to work at the bar. But as soon as she returned, she came face to face with the creepy Matsuo. Matsuo, like a predator eyeing his prey, calmly observed Samantha. In order not to be deported, Samantha wavered on Matsuo's proposition of becoming his sexy prey. They negotiated, ultimately agreeing that Samantha would accompany Matsuo for 10 nights. Curious about who had sent Matsuo, she wasn't surprised to learn it was her own father. Matsuo made it clear that she could either entertain him for 10 times or go back home. Faced with such an easy choice, Samantha chose to tolerate her disgust and sleep with Matsuo. This might indicate that her father was even more perverse than Matsuo. When her shift ended, Sato was waiting for Samantha outside the bar. The gigolo who was dating the girl Pina also dressed up to take Pina to a party. Samantha went home with Sato to spend the night. Afterward, they both felt hungry, so Sato took the initiative to make some late-night snacks. With his sexy demeanor and exquisite cooking skills, he captured Samantha's stomach and her heart. She was touched and couldn't help but confess to Sato her fear of being targeted by Matsuo. His sympathy for her was palpable, and he held her close, vowing to help her deal with Matsuo. Later, he went to Matsuo's office and lied that Samantha had the backing of the Chihara gang, warning him not to mess with her. But Matsuo saw through his lies in a second, saying it's just him who was backing her. Sato's threats had no effect on Matsuo, who dismissed him and insulted Samantha, which infuriated Sato. The two ended up in muscle wrestling, and Matsuo was knocked unconscious. But Sato, still seething, took a vase and smashed it onto Matsuo's head. The panic of his first murder had faded. All that was left on Sato's face was numbness. Meanwhile, Pina's party started amidst the dazzling lights. She watched her gigolo boyfriend from afar, trying his best to entertain other women. After taking care of the guests, her boyfriend finally had time to pay attention to Pina. He managed to persuade her to spend $300,000 on an expensive bottle of wine. Cheers rang out in the bar. Pina thought that by doing this, she could capture her boyfriend's heart and make him focus only on her. She kept ordering luxurious drinks until she lost herself in the alcohol and ended up collapsing. But under the dim lights, her boyfriend was entangled with a new rich woman. The next day, Tokyo awakens in the morning light. Jake rushes to the police station to find his backup, Miyamoto. He shares the information he received about Tozawa's transporting drugs, hoping Miyamoto could issue a search warrant. Miyamoto agrees to dispatch officers. He and Jake rush to the airport, circling the airplane inside and out. However, the plane, which was supposed to contain the drugs, was clean. Miyamoto accuses Jake of deceiving him. At this moment, Hiroto arrives. Jake is left embarrassed and flustered as an anticipated blame comes his way. Jake returns to the newspaper empty-handed. Although he thought he wouldn't be able to submit a report, his boss surprisingly asks him to write about the incompetent police hitting a dead end. He argues that it's unfair for the police to take the blame for his mistakes. However, he has no choice but to bow down again to his boss. In the evening, a disheartened Jake goes to the bar just in time to catch Sato, who has once again screwed up, trying to unwind. Jake is angry at Sato for giving him wrong leads. Sato, who gets a good scolding for no reason, is also quite angry. The two nearly get into a fight in the bar. Samantha tries to mediate but gets caught in the crossfire. In fact, the information from the Chihara gang was not wrong. The real mess was made by Miyamoto, whom Jake sought help from. He had colluded with Tozawa and successfully covered up the drugs during the morning search. He asked Miyamoto how he knew about the information in advance. Miyamoto ratted out the naive Jake. A week later, a body was found in the river. The dead person was the porter who was on duty when Jake and Miyamoto inspected the airport. Hiroto realizes that this person was silenced, and it must be related to the unsuccessful drug bust at the airport that day. Since the last time Jake acted rashly by going to Miyamoto behind his back, Hiroto has not contacted Jake. However, Jake called 3 times a day to reconcile with the police, but all his messages were thrown into the trash by Hiroto. Suddenly, the Drug Enforcement Department calls a press conference. The worker team from Akira News arrived on time. The Drug Enforcement team, including Miyamoto, gave the reporters a press conference that lasted about a minute. They simply introduced Miyamoto and the new clues he found about a recent murder case during his daily drug enforcement activities. The press conference divulged limited information, which annoyed Emi. Nobody knew about Miyamoto's collusion with Tozawa yet, but the boss suddenly called him and 2 other colleagues to join the operation to arrest Tozawa. The boss indicated that they had roughly grasped evidence of Tozawa's gang drug trafficking, but what exactly the evidence was remained undisclosed. This news made Miyamoto fall into deep thought. As a mole for Tozawa, he wanted to find out what clues the police had. But the person currently in charge of the operation was Detective Hiroto, with whom he had always been on bad terms. Afterward, Emi is quite shocked that Miyamoto agrees to dine with her, particularly given the ridicule he had faced in the press after an abrupt airport inspection. However, Miyamoto takes advantage of this opportunity before Emi changes her mind, inviting her to ask any questions she might have. Emi probes him about the details of a recent murder case. Miyamoto is surprisingly forthcoming, but he's not a saint. His agreement to dine with Emi is in fact a ploy to extract information about whether Jake had mentioned any evidence regarding the prosecution of the Tozawa gang. Emi flatly denies any knowledge, suggesting that Miyamoto ask Jake directly. After parting ways with Miyamoto, Emi calls Jake to inform him about the police's decision to officially prosecute Tozawa. On the other end, Jake is enjoying some leisure time when he receives a call from his boss. The news of the police's actions shocks him, especially as he's lost the favor of Hiroto and offended Miyamoto. Now he's completely in the dark about the police's moves. After hanging up Emi's call, Jake gets out of bed and starts his workday. A high school friend from his time in the US stops him. He is visiting Japan, and after a brief catch-up, Jake rushes off to work. They agree to meet for dinner that evening to reminisce about old times. At the bar that evening, Jake and his friend chat about their past. Jake, unable to resist his dancing genes, brings his friend to the dance floor where he bumps into Tozawa's girlfriend. On the other side, Samantha's dream of owning a bar is gradually taking shape. She invites the star hostess of her previous bar to join her, offering a decent salary. However, the hostess is not interested in her offer, reluctant to join the new bar due to its high-risk nature. Moreover, the unpredictable influence of Sato, a Mafia member in this business, adds to her concerns. Samantha goes to work at the bar in the evening, but Pina is nowhere to be found and does not answer her calls. This leaves her somewhat panicked. She confides in Sato, who simply suggests that Pina might be needing alone time to contemplate life. Samantha doesn't buy it, knowing that Pina is not that deep of a person. Samantha goes to Pina's residence to look for clues. The roommate tells her that the last time she saw Pina was last Friday, when she was planning to take her designer bag and go on a trip. This strikes Samantha as odd. The first person she thinks of is the so-called boyfriend of Pina. She goes to the gigolo's place to ask if he knows anything about Pina's whereabouts. However, the man dismisses her, arrogantly stating that he can't keep track of all the women who love him. Samantha is disgusted by his attitude, barely able to stand his hormone smell for more than 3 seconds. Unable to extract any useful information, she resorts to asking for help from her Mafia boyfriend, Sato. Backed by Sato, Samantha confronts the gigolo, who instantly becomes meek, begging only that they not hit his money-making face. They then learn that Pina's disappearance is due to her accumulating a large debt at his place and being unable to repay it. Samantha is furious, knowing that Pina owes money because of the gigolo. They go to confront the gigolo shop owner, but she doesn't back down even with Sato's presence. She calmly tells them that women who owe money at her place are sent to Yoshino until they can pay off their debts. Sato tries to pressure her for more information, but notices the Tozawa gang's thugs behind the gigolo shop. The shop owner warns Sato not to overstep or it will upset his boss Ishida. Sato wisely chooses to leave, but not before relaying the clue about Yoshino to Samantha. However, Samantha wants Sato to go back and ask more. Sato knows very well that if he causes trouble here, the consequences will be severe, especially since Ishida has explicitly ordered not to clash with the Tozawa gang and give them a pretext for war. He was eager to escape from this place of strife, but Samantha tried to sweet-talk him into returning. A clear-headed Sato was disgusted by her actions, feeling that she was disregarding his safety. After a big argument, they went their separate ways. The scene shifts to Miyamoto, who hadn't got useful information from Emi. He decided to try his luck with Hiroto. To his surprise, Hiroto didn't seem to hold any grudges against him. He brought him to his office and showed him a photograph of a porter's corpse that was discovered in the morning. He explained that the man was his informant, who had collected a lot of clues, but was found dead under suspicious circumstances. Fortunately, he already had enough evidence in his hand to prosecute Tozawa. Miyamoto asked where these pieces of evidence were kept, and Hiroto unambiguously informed him that they were hidden in the archive room. Miyamoto wanted to see the evidence with his own eyes, but Hiroto said that no one could enter before the case was settled. On the other hand, Tozawa was oblivious to the fact that the police were about to indict him. He was celebrating his birthday with people from all walks of life. His usually somber expression was replaced with a welcoming smile. Miyamoto, his old friend from the police station, quietly appeared at the scene to wish him a happy birthday. However, he brought with him the news that the police were about to charge Tozawa. He planned to part ways after revealing this information to Tozawa, but Tozawa once again lured him into investigating the evidence held by the police. After parting with Miyamoto, Tozawa returned to his birthday banquet. However, he hadn't walked far when he suddenly felt unwell. He fell to the ground, struggling to breathe. In his delirium, he called for his girlfriend. It seemed he still had some genuine feelings for her. However, the girlfriend he longed for was dancing with Jake in the dance hall. Without her bodyguard, she became bold. Jake finally got his chance to talk to her, but before they could exchange a few words, Tozawa's bodyguard suddenly appeared. Jake's friend, unaware of the situation, tried to stop the gangsters but was slapped by Tokyo's Mafia. After calming down his friend, Jake returned home, only to find the woman of his dreams sitting outside his front door. On the other side, Miyamoto had accepted Tozawa's request and was itching to explore the evidence in the archive room. He seized the chance when the night was deep and no one was around, stealthily picking the lock on the archive room's door. However, when he entered the room, he found it to be eerily empty. He suddenly realized that he had been set up. The next day, Samantha woke up on Jake's tiny but hormone-smelly bed, only to find that Jake had already gone out to search for clues of her missing friend. He had thoughtfully left her a comforting note. After a while, Jake returned to the cabin, but he hadn't obtained any useful intelligence. He suggested to Samantha that she should report to the police for help, which instantly displeased her. But she realized she was wrong and immediately apologized to Jake. Luckily, Jake didn't take her temper tantrum to heart. The two tried to sort out the clues again and found out that the gigolo shop where Pina owed money had a close relationship with Tozawa. This gave Jake a burst of energy, as he knew someone who even knew Tozawa's underwear color, the photographer. Jake took Samantha to the photographer's place. However, the man was much more cautious this time, questioning Jake's true identity. Jake could only pull out something valuable to exchange for information. The photographer agreed. Samantha asked the photographer for information about Yoshino and found out that Yoshino was actually a cruise ship managed by Tozawa that provided girl services. After getting the clue, Samantha abruptly changed her attitude, gave the dazed photographer a crippling kick, and ran away with Jake. The two decided to split up and look for clues about the Yoshino cruise ship. After receiving the goddess's kiss, Jake felt like his life was complete. He hopped back home, but was taken aback the moment he opened the door. A group of thugs had been waiting in his house for a long time. These two men in black were Tozawa's henchmen, who formally issued a warning to him, punching him straight in the face but sparing his life. Jake was left bruised and battered. On the other side, Hiroto and his family were welcoming a brand new day. The daughters were well-behaved and adorable. The wife was gentle and virtuous, and everything at work was going smoothly, especially after catching Miyamoto's slip-up. Miyamoto, whose identity had been exposed, actively sought out Hiroto for a conversation, hoping that Hiroto would allow him to save some face. Miyamoto regretted his actions, offering to confess his crimes and resign in disgrace. However, Hiroto believed that Miyamoto still held the sincerity of a good cop and hoped that he would atone in a different way. He suggested that Miyamoto become a double agent, concealing the fact that his identity had been exposed and working from both sides to take down the entire Tozawa gang. Meanwhile, Tozawa had summoned a family doctor after fainting at a banquet. After a conversation with the physician and receiving an injection, his girlfriend walked in. Tozawa was filled with jealousy, but maintained a domineering demeanor, saying that he heard she spent last night at the nightclub with that foreign reporter. Remaining calm, his girlfriend explained that she had been followed by Jake and was lucky to have been saved by her bodyguard. She emphasized her love for Tozawa, but the aloof Tozawa didn't believe her. He undid his pants, suggesting that if she loved him, she should prove it. Not wanting to be undignified like a prostitute, she refused, which led to her being beaten by Tozawa. After that, Tozawa coldly told her to leave. Soon after, Tozawa received a visit from Miyamoto. As per Hiroto's instructions, Miyamoto informed Tozawa that the police didn't have any evidence and suggested that Hiroto was colluding with Ishida. Given this, Tozawa felt there was no need for him to maintain his innocence. He was non-committal about the new information brought by Miyamoto, but they shook hands, deciding to continue their friendly cooperation. After completing his task, Miyamoto reported his work situation to Hiroto and brought new intelligence. He claimed that Tozawa was going to transfer the drugs to another warehouse that night. He planned to go with Tozawa, taking the opportunity to meet Hiroto. However, Hiroto furrowed his brows, worried that Miyamoto was playing a double game. This made Miyamoto feel wronged, asserting that he wanted to be a good cop. His resolute expression managed to convince Hiroto, and the two decided to take action that night to secure solid evidence of Tozawa's drug trafficking. The scene shifts to a meeting being held by the leaders of the Chihara gang. Boss Ishida is having breakfast while listening to Sato's new plan. However, this morning's miso soup seems a bit off. Ishida carries the soup to the hall, questioning who was responsible for this unfortunate mix-up. The underling who Sato had personally recruited stepped forward nervously. He kept making excuses, much to Ishida's annoyance. The boss dumped the soup over the underling's head. Sato, instead of punishing the underling, encouraged him to learn from his mistakes and work hard in the gang. Later in the afternoon, while the bosses were having a meeting upstairs, a noisy commotion erupted downstairs. Sato went out to find that it was the underling who had messed up the miso soup. He was attempting to cut off his little finger in penance. The bloody scene coupled with the underling's chicken cries were particularly disturbing. Ishida walked over looking at the underling indifferently, saying that the knuckle wasn't easy to cut through and he should cut from a lower position. His advice left the underling stunned as his fellows seized the opportunity to take away the knife. The finger wasn't cut off, and the underling ended up awkwardly at the hospital for treatment. However, Sato didn't blame him harshly. He drove the underling back to his original home and even gave him a wad of cash to start his life anew. The underling's gangster experience had ended, and he hesitated on how to explain it to his family. But Sato just told him that he was lucky because many people didn't get the chance to start over. Elsewhere, after parting with Jake, Samantha ran into the panicky gigolo at her apartment building. The man begged for her help, claiming that he had just received a distress call from Pina, who had been kidnapped by a loan shark, demanding 10 million or they would harm her sexy body. Samantha was anxious upon hearing this. She decided to use her cash on hand to save Pina without worrying about her bar. However, when she arrived at the agreed-upon location with the cash, something seemed off. She asked to speak with Pina to ensure she was alive, but the other party was reluctant. Samantha retreated cautiously, holding on to her money, never expecting the treacherous gigolo to stab her in the back. A gang of despicable men took advantage of the situation to rob her of all her cash. Samantha's bar was due to make its final payment that day, but she was now cleaned out. For her long-held dream, she decided to take a risk and deal with the gang. Sato was surprised to see Samantha. He tried to persuade Ishida not to cooperate with her in opening a new bar, but Ishida was interested in her business proposal and assigned Sato to be in charge of this project. After failing to persuade Ishida, Sato waited for Samantha at her place. He urged her to be careful. Clearly, both of them still had feelings for each other, but Sato resisted the urge to kiss her. After bidding each other goodnight, they turned away. However, just as Sato was about to get into his car, he was ambushed by an underling from his own gang and was left lying outside Samantha's apartment. As nightfall descends, Miyamoto begins his operation alongside the Tozawa gang. However, the route they take differs from the one previously agreed upon. He attempts to retrieve his phone to alert Hiroto of the change in plans, but the Tozawa gang refuses to return it. Unaware of the situation, Hiroto proceeds towards the designated warehouse. Despite waiting until darkness falls, he sees no sign of Tozawa. He tries calling Miyamoto, only to find him unreachable. The sharp-witted Hiroto realizes something is amiss. He sneaks into the warehouse under the cover of darkness, only to find Tozawa has been waiting for him for some time. It turns out Tozawa had long discovered Miyamoto's lies. His fatal mistake was trying to convince him that Hiroto was also a gangster's lackey. With Miyamoto now missing and Hiroto's wife and daughter in Tozawa's hands, the typically defiant Hiroto is utterly defeated. Tozawa has gained everything, and to protect his family, Hiroto has no choice but to abandon the pursuit of his gang. In high spirits after securing victory over Hiroto, Tozawa prepares to leave town that night. However, before he leaves, he summons his girlfriend, whose smile is sincere and full of love. Leaning in, Tozawa whispers into her ear, saying that he would be around much longer. His words send chills down the spine. After bidding farewell to his girlfriend, Tozawa steps onto his private plane, his smile inscrutable. Scene shifts. Jake, covered in bruises, faces a new dawn. Despite the intense pain, he dresses in his work uniform only to find a mysterious paper bag at his doorstep. Inside the bag is a videotape labeled Yoshino, featuring Pina. She doesn't appear coerced, but she's being roughed up by a mysterious man for resisting a customer. She protests, claiming that such treatment wasn't part of their agreement, but her pleas are met with a flurry of punches and kicks. Eventually, she collapses, lifeless. Off-screen, Jake is in rage. The only person he can think of who could help him now is Hiroto, who is in a similarly dire situation. Jake arrives at Hiroto's doorstep with the tape, his determined gaze and battered face earning Hiroto's forgiveness for his previous recklessness. With that, the first season of the drama concludes. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.